The first thing anyone would notice about my neighborhood was the quiet. Lakeview Meadows looked peaceful from the outside. Manicured lawns, neatly trimmed hedges, and rows of houses that whispered suburbia perfection. But behind that calm, there was always tension, a simmering undercurrent of power struggles and petty tyranny. And I had just moved into the eye of the storm without realizing it. I remember stepping out of my car that morning, keys jingling, sun cutting across the pavement in long streaks, and wondering for a brief moment if I'd made a mistake. The gate was old, wooden, and scarred, the metal lock rusted but still holding firm. I had been told stories about the HOA's rules, about the way Karen Morrison operated. They said she controlled everything, knew everyone's business, and had a reputation for getting her way no matter the cost. But nothing could have prepared me for the storm I was about to step into. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now. Seriously, I want to know. Your city, your state, even just your country. Let's see how far this story stretches, because this isn't just my fight. Once you hear what happened, you'll understand why this is a story about courage, law, and plain stubborn justice. It started with a knock. 3 sharp raps at my front gate, and I could hear the muffled voices of people who thought they could intimidate me before even seeing who I was. I approached cautiously, swinging the gate open. And there she was. HOA Karen, hair perfectly coiffed, outfit immaculate, heels clicking like a warning drumbeat against the concrete. She wasn't alone. A small entourage flanked her, looking like they had been briefed on exactly what she wanted: compliance, fear, and instant obedience. Karen didn't even wait for me to greet her. She shoved forward, voice sharp and commanding. I have rights to this property, and you cannot stop me." Her eyes glinted with that familiar mix of arrogance and entitlement. I blinked. For a moment, I thought she might be serious, but the smirk creeping across her face told me everything I needed to know. She had power in her head and in the HOA records, but she had zero grasp on reality. I stepped aside, letting her entourage move forward, and glanced at the gate key in my hand. My grandfather had bought this land decades ago, long before any HOA could dream of controlling it. The deed was clear, the boundaries were marked, and legally speaking, Karen had no claim here. But she didn't care about law. She cared about appearances, dominance, and her own inflated sense of control. The tension was immediate, thick enough to taste. My first thought? She's not going to back down, so why should I? And with that, I turned the key in the old lock, feeling the satisfying click echo like a drumbeat of inevitability. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now. This story is about standing up, about proving that rules, property rights, and common sense still matter. I want you to feel this. Place yourself at that gate, looking down the long driveway at someone who believes the world revolves around them. How would you react? Karen's scream split the morning air like glass breaking. You can't do this. This is my community. My guests have rights. She threw her hands up, voice rising, desperation mixing with rage. It was almost comical if it weren't so infuriating. She had apparently assumed that my silence would be compliance, that I would let her parade her guests in, as if she had the power of the entire county behind her. But I wasn't going to flinch. I stood firm, leaning against the gate, eyes unwavering, calm, precise, unshakable. That was my stance. My grandfather taught me that the world doesn't bend to threats. It bends to evidence, law, and patience. And today, I held all 3 in my hand. The guests behind her shuffled awkwardly, some clearly uncomfortable, others smirking at the absurdity of the situation. I could feel the energy shift with every heartbeat, a mix of fear and anticipation buzzing in the air. Karen's face turned red, not just from exertion, but from the realization that her usual tactics of intimidation were failing. She tried to reason, or at least her version of reasoning. "You can't just… This is a community, not your private property." Her voice quavered slightly as she spoke, betraying the fact that the ground beneath her feet was less stable than she'd anticipated. But I held firm. Silence, measured, authoritative, the kind that commands attention without shouting. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? This is the moment where we all ask ourselves if we have the courage to stand firm when someone powerful demands compliance. Think about it. Could you do it? Could you lock a gate against someone who screams and demands authority they don't have? I did, and it was only the beginning. Karen's fists clenched at her sides. Her eyes darted between the gate, her guests, and me. I could see the calculation behind her glare, trying to weigh options, trying to figure how to manipulate the narrative in her favor. But she had overlooked one thing. I wasn't just anyone. I was a careful observer, a methodical planner, someone who understood systems, laws, and human behavior. Her bluster meant nothing. Threats had no power over evidence, and lies collapsed under scrutiny. And yet the audacity of her performance, the entitlement, the shouting, the sheer arrogance, it sparked a fire in me. A combination of fury and focus. This wasn't personal, it was justice in motion. I could feel the neighborhood watching, even if they weren't physically present. Stories travel fast. One HOA Karen, attempting to dominate and manipulate, confronted by someone who wouldn't bend, that's news. I let my gaze sweep over her, letting the silence weigh heavily. Then, slowly, I locked the gate completely, the sound of metal clicking into place loud and deliberate. The message was clear. Not today, not here, not on my grandfather's land. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? This is a story about consequences, about power being held accountable, about patience, planning, and the courage to act when injustice slams at your door. The next moves would be critical, and Karen had no idea that the tide had already turned. Her scream came again, higher this time, filled with panic rather than authority. "I have rights! I demand entry!" She stomped forward, but her guests were now frozen, unsure whether to follow her lead or acknowledge the reality of the situation. One by one, their confidence wavered. I watched, controlled, precise. I could see the unraveling, the cracks forming in the edifice of her intimidation. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. Sometimes, standing still with truth on your side is the most aggressive move you can make. Karen turned on me, eyes blazing, voice dripping venom. "You will regret this. You don't know who you're messing with." The heat in her tone was real, but it was a bluff, a final desperate push against reality. I stepped back slightly, gesturing to the locked gate, my calm authority unshaken. "Karen, the law, the deed, and the facts are on my side. Your threats do not alter them. You can scream, you can threaten, but you cannot rewrite the truth." Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because this is the point where everything pivots. The villain believes she is untouchable, yet the first strike has already landed. And believe me, this is just the opening act of a story that's about to explode in ways she cannot imagine. Karen's breathing quickened, her composure shattered. The reality of the situation was sinking in, even if she couldn't articulate it yet. Her guests shifted uncomfortably, murmuring among themselves. Some clearly questioned whether her authority had merit. Others just wanted to leave, sensing the tension and unpredictability. The air was charged, vibrating with the intensity of confrontation. Every second ticked by like a countdown. And I knew that the real battle wasn't just outside this gate. It was coming, slowly, meticulously, in every document, every fact, and every truth I had ready to reveal. And there it was, the first crack in the armor. Karen Morrison, usually a hurricane of control, now reduced to panic, rage, and desperate threats. I stood there, calm and resolute, the gate locked, the authority undeniable. This was the moment that set the stage for everything that followed, the moment that told me and everyone watching that justice wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. I wasn't born to settle for shortcuts or excuses. Discipline, integrity, and preparation were drilled into me from the start. My father, a decorated federal agent, used to say, "Michael, the world doesn't care how loud you scream. It cares how prepared you are." I carried that lesson into every aspect of my life, and it shaped me into someone who observes, analyzes, and acts with precision. By the time I inherited the property at Lakeview Meadows, I had already spent 15 years working cases that involved fraud, deception, and manipulation. I knew the smell of a lie before it was spoken, the trace of a forged signature before it was even inked. People often asked how I stayed calm in situations that would terrify others. The answer was simple. I didn't allow fear to enter the equation. I let facts, law, and preparation lead every decision. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Think about that for a second. Because this story isn't just about an HOA gone rogue. It's about standing firm when someone believes their title, reputation, or network grants them invincibility. I grew up learning that authority doesn't equal truth. Karen Morrison, powerful as she seemed, had never met someone willing to match her in both strategy and patience. That was about to change. My background wasn't flashy, but it was formidable. After graduating top of my class from the Federal Investigation Academy, I spent years navigating legal gray areas and prosecuting complex fraud cases. I worked in environments where a single misstep could cost millions, where patience was as lethal as aggression. Those years taught me to see the bigger picture, to anticipate moves like a chess master seeing 5 steps ahead. Every property, every document, every signature told a story if you knew how to read it. And I did. That knowledge wasn't just academic, it was tactical. When Karen thought she could manipulate me with noise, threats, and entitlement, she had no idea that I had already analyzed every possible scenario, every loophole, and every weakness in her plan. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? This is where you need to ask yourself, would you be ready to confront a villain armed with lies, forged documents, and the support of the community? Or would you crumble under the first scream of entitlement? My readiness wasn't luck. It was years of study, real-world experience, and a commitment to never letting power go unchecked. I understood systems, HOA rules, county regulations, financial flows, and I could wield them like tools, not weapons. That distinction would make all the difference. I also had a moral compass that couldn't be shaken. Some people fight because they are angry. I fight because injustice is intolerable. The law isn't just a set of rules, it's a shield, a framework, a safeguard for those who can't defend themselves against manipulative power plays. Karen's brand of authority, manipulative, arrogant, self-serving, clashed directly with everything I had been trained to recognize and correct. That clash wasn't personal, it was inevitable. And in every encounter with her, I relied on that moral certainty as much as my legal knowledge. It gave me calm in chaos, clarity in confusion, and patience in confrontation. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because this is the moment where your own perspective matters. Are you willing to stand up for what's right, even when the odds seem stacked? I had faced threats, false accusations, and powerful adversaries before. But this situation with Karen was different. It involved an entire community, misdirected trust, diverted funds, and a personal property stake I could not abandon. My grandfather's lake wasn't just land, it was a legacy, a symbol of perseverance, honesty, and family. And Karen Morrison had decided to treat it like her personal playground. I remember the first night I began organizing my approach. I spread out documents across my desk, maps, deeds, emails, invoices, every piece a puzzle fragment. The magnitude of the situation was staggering. 3 years of calculated deception, threats, and misappropriation. It would take precision to dismantle, patience to reveal, and a relentless commitment to the truth. That night I reviewed every county record, HOA minute, and correspondence I could get my hands on. I didn't panic. I logged, cross-checked, and prepared. My background demanded nothing less than meticulous attention to detail. This wasn't just preparation. It was laying the groundwork for justice. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now. Consider the stakes. Karen Morrison thought her charisma and her presidency insulated her from consequences. She believed she could intimidate, manipulate, and silence anyone who opposed her. What she didn't realize was that preparation and moral authority outweigh aggression when they are combined. She didn't know that I had spent decades understanding exactly how people like her think, exactly how they operate, and exactly how they crumble under evidence. My personal history gave me another advantage: credibility. Years as a federal investigator had earned me respect, familiarity with legal procedures, and an instinct for exposing fraud. People tend to trust someone who speaks from authority, not just arrogance, not just bravado, but genuine expertise. That trust would be essential when I faced Karen in front of the community. I needed witnesses to understand that the evidence I presented was beyond debate, beyond emotion, and grounded in the law. That credibility didn't come overnight. It was earned through decades of dedication, through countless investigations, and through confronting villains who believed themselves untouchable. Karen would learn that firsthand. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because this is more than a story of one confrontation. It's about seeing how preparation and authority intersect with courage. I had honed these skills for a lifetime, and now they were being applied not to some distant courtroom, but to a very real, very immediate threat to family, legacy, and community integrity. It's one thing to know the law. It's another to wield it effectively against someone who thrives on deception and manipulation. That's the difference between surviving and winning. Family legacy also mattered deeply. My grandfather, Walt Brennan, had purchased this lake and surrounding land in 1947 with sweat, determination, and careful calculation. He taught me the value of patience, respect, and the importance of truth in every transaction. Karen Morrison's audacity wasn't just an affront to me, it was an attack on decades of familial sacrifice. This personal connection amplified my resolve. Rage alone would never have been enough. But coupled with experience, knowledge, and moral clarity, it became a force that was precise, controlled, and unavoidable. Before we go any further, comment below. Where are you watching from right now? Think about what it takes to defend what's rightfully yours against someone who thinks rules don't apply to them. Karen Morrison assumed entitlement was a shield. She underestimated the power of preparation, authority, and unwavering patience. By the time I locked the gate that morning and watched Karen's face contort with rage, I wasn't reacting. I was executing a plan. Every experience in my life, from federal investigations to personal mentorship, led me to this moment. The calm I projected wasn't fearlessness. It was strategy. Every word she screamed, every threat she hurled, reinforced my understanding of her playbook. I knew her patterns, her escalation triggers, and the exact points where evidence would overwhelm her facade. And I also knew that this confrontation wasn't the end. It was the opening act of a meticulous unraveling. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? This is the point where moral clarity meets legal authority. Every viewer who has ever felt powerless in the face of corruption, intimidation, or fraud should recognize that preparation and patience are as crucial as courage. That day, those principles were about to be tested in real time, in front of an entire community that had been deceived for years. My credibility, experience, and moral code weren't just for show. They were the weapons I carried into this battle. Karen Morrison had underestimated one thing. The combination of law, truth, and unshakable calm is a force even the most arrogant cannot withstand. Her rage might have commanded attention, but it could never command reality. Every email I had collected, every HOA document I had verified, every county record I had analyzed was a piece of evidence that would make her claims crumble. And when that day arrived, she would have nowhere to hide. By the time the sun set on that first confrontation, I felt a strange sense of anticipation. Not fear, not exhilaration, but a readiness that only comes when preparation meets opportunity. The foundation was set. Authority was established. Morality was clear. And the stage was ready for Karen Morrison to reveal the true extent of her deception and to face the consequences that had been patiently waiting for her all along. HOA structures are supposed to protect communities, to provide oversight and fairness. But in Lakeview Meadows, the system was rigged to reward arrogance, favoritism, and control. From the moment Karen Morrison assumed the presidency, it became clear that the rules were merely suggestions she could bend, twist, or ignore entirely. The first thing I noticed as I dug into the HOA records was the subtle pattern of intimidation. Certain members who disagreed with her vanished from votes, avoided meetings, or found their concerns dismissed with alarming efficiency. She didn't just hold power, she weaponized it. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now. Because what I'm about to describe isn't some isolated conflict. It's a blueprint for how authority, unchecked, can manipulate an entire community. The voting records told part of the story. On paper, meetings appeared democratic, unanimous, and transparent. But in reality, Karen controlled the narrative. Minutes were selective, edits were untraceable, and critical decisions were masked by jargon and vague phrasing. She would present proposals as collaborative efforts, while already having lined up silent agreements from allies who owed her favors, shared her ambition, or feared her retaliation. By the time a motion appeared on the agenda, the outcome was preordained. Residents who questioned her authority were painted as troublemakers, their concerns minimized, and in some cases, they were subtly threatened with fines or restrictions. This wasn't leadership. It was manipulation. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now, because understanding the structure of corruption is the first step toward dismantling it. Karen Morrison thrived in ambiguity. She understood that if she created enough procedural fog, people would defer to her expertise, believing the complexities were beyond their understanding. Yet beneath that fog, she was exploiting the system for personal gain. From unauthorized expenditures to misleading communications, every decision was a calculated act of self-interest disguised as community stewardship. The hierarchy itself was unbalanced. The board of 5 was supposed to share responsibility equally, but Karen's influence rendered them ineffective. 3 members, either intimidated or complicit, voted in lockstep with her, rubber-stamping proposals that benefited her or her private ventures. The other 2, hesitant and cautious, often felt silenced or ignored. Public meetings, meant to allow residents to voice concerns, were carefully choreographed performances where she controlled timing, topics, and attention. The result was an illusion of transparency, while real control remained tightly concentrated in her hands. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because this is critical. Karen Morrison wasn't sloppy. Her strategy relied on precision, fear, and misdirection. Emails would vanish, approvals would be backdated, and records selectively edited. She understood that perception often outweighed reality. If she could convince the community that she was acting in their best interest, she could quietly manipulate funds, forge partnerships, and even co-opt outsiders into her schemes. And she did, with stunning efficiency. 2. The intimidation tactics were subtle but effective. Residents who dared to question her decisions faced personal scrutiny, veiled threats, and social isolation. She would call them in private, insist she was only offering guidance, and then imply consequences if they persisted. The woman in the expensive suit, who often accompanied her to meetings, seemed to act as both witness and enforcer, ensuring Karen's authority went unchallenged. I saw patterns emerge in financial decisions, project approvals, and even property-related discussions. When she wanted a particular outcome, dissent was quietly erased or redirected. By the time someone realized what had happened, the decision was irreversible. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? The psychological weight of this structure was immense. People deferred because they didn't want to be ostracized or financially penalized. They trusted a president who had weaponized their fears against them. Karen's arrogance wasn't just in how she spoke or acted. It was in how she engineered compliance through subtle threats and engineered loyalty. Every HOA rule, every community policy, every procedural nuance was leveraged to protect her and further her agenda. One of the most striking aspects was her manipulation of funds. The $15,000 for lake access improvements was just the tip of the iceberg. She routinely approved expenditures without full board approval, miscategorized payments, and created plausible but false receipts. On paper, everything appeared legitimate. In reality, she siphoned money from dues meant for community maintenance into projects that enriched her personally or fed her narrative of controlling the lake. The other board members either didn't notice, trusted her judgment blindly, or feared confronting her. This wasn't oversight. It was submission. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because understanding Karen's methodical approach reveals why she believed herself untouchable. She wasn't just bold, she was careful. Every action, every misrepresentation, every diversion of funds was calculated to maintain her image, protect her personal interests, and prevent accountability. She had created a fortress of power inside the HOA that looked legitimate, complete with meetings, votes, and public records, all of it manipulated to her benefit. I also noticed how she misrepresented the law. She would speak of community rights as if the lake belonged to every HOA member, suggesting legal control that never existed. She claimed access was guaranteed, threatened members who questioned her, and leaned on her reputation to silence skeptics. It was a masterclass in authority distortion. Present fiction as fact, reinforce it with selective evidence, and leverage fear to maintain compliance. The sophistication was remarkable and dangerous. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Think about this. How often do people conflate confidence with competence? Karen relied on that instinctive deference. She understood that if she appeared in control, if she spoke with conviction, and if she manipulated small technicalities, people would follow. That gave her unchecked freedom to pursue personal enrichment while projecting community leadership. Then there was the secrecy. Many residents didn't even realize the scale of her influence until I began assembling the evidence. Hidden votes, selective email distribution, and ambiguous meeting minutes created a controlled narrative. Karen's influence extended beyond official channels. She whispered, persuaded, and cajoled in private, ensuring her will was executed without public awareness. This was power exercised in shadows, protected by the assumption that no one would notice the discrepancies until it was too late. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because if you've ever wondered how someone can dominate a system designed for fairness, this is the answer. Karen Morrison had weaponized every tool, every rule, and every relationship to consolidate control. It wasn't just audacious, it was strategic, relentless, and terrifyingly effective until the right opponent arrived. The residents themselves were pawns in her system. They were lulled into complacency by her confidence, reassured by her selective reporting, and silenced by subtle threats of consequences for dissent. The HOA meetings that were supposed to foster community and accountability became stages where her dominance was performed and reinforced. Any attempt to question her was painted as hostility, a personal attack, or a misunderstanding of her vision. By the time the situation reached me, her fortress was immense, but it had weaknesses that only someone with precise authority, moral clarity, and unwavering preparation could exploit. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? This is the moment where you recognize that power, unchecked and unchallenged, can corrupt even the systems meant to protect people. Karen Morrison's reign was a textbook case of authority abused, a reminder that vigilance is not optional. But like all empires built on lies, cracks form when evidence and accountability begin to accumulate. That's where I was ready to strike. By the time I began assembling legal documentation, cross-checking minutes, and tracing financial flows, I had a clear picture of Karen's HOA empire. Rigid, intimidating, fraudulent, and fragile when confronted with truth. Her confidence, her aggression, and her public persona would not protect her from the weight of evidence, community witnesses, and the law. And as I prepared to confront her, every email, every ledger entry, and every forged claim became a weapon in my arsenal. The moment I started digging, the depth of Karen Morrison's deception became staggering. What at first appeared to be minor irregularities quickly revealed themselves as part of an intricate, calculated scheme. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because what I uncovered wasn't just about HOA mismanagement, it was about deliberate fraud, theft, and manipulation. Every document I pulled, every record I traced, told a story of someone who had weaponized both law and perception to enrich herself at the community's expense. I knew immediately that this wasn't going to be a quick confrontation. It was going to be a full-blown exposure of years of calculated deception. I began with the most obvious piece, the deed to the lake. My grandfather's signature, notarized and filed back in 1947, had long been a symbol of our family's legal claim. It was 3.2 acres of private property, clear of encumbrances, precisely mapped and unquestioned. Then came my uncle's inheritance, unchanged since 1983. That document alone was enough to show that Karen had no standing to claim access rights, yet she had presented herself as the guardian of community entitlement, projecting authority she did not possess. She had built her narrative on a foundation that didn't exist. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because even a single falsified document or the misuse of a genuine one can create the illusion of legality. And Karen had done exactly that. Emails between her and the HOA board members revealed a pattern of misrepresentation so precise it could have fooled a seasoned auditor. She requested $15,000 for lake access improvements, claiming negotiations with me were ongoing, all while the county had denied her petition months prior. She concealed that denial from the board, presenting instead a story of progress and legal strategy. The full scope of deception was hidden in plain sight, buried beneath a veil of official-sounding language and selective disclosure. I traced the paper trail back to her first, overt attempt at manipulation. 3 years ago, Karen approached my uncle with an offer for an easement. He declined, politely but firmly, in writing. That refusal should have ended her campaign. Instead, it was the starting point for a multi-year effort to fabricate legitimacy. I held my uncle's letter in my hands and felt a surge of outrage. How could someone take a firm no and turn it into a platform for personal profit? It was audacity in its rawest form, and it was only the beginning. Before we go any further, comment below. Where are you watching from right now? The subsequent months revealed a meticulous sequence of actions designed to deceive multiple parties simultaneously. Karen presented falsified meeting minutes to the board, claiming ongoing negotiations and funding needs. She framed her requests as community improvements while diverting the funds into personal projects and a private LLC she had set up for a fishing club. Emails with Ron Harper, the unsuspecting investor, confirmed the full scale of her plan. $500,000 invested on the premise that she controlled legal access to property that was not hers. The pretense was flawless, yet completely false. Cross-referencing HOA financial records was where the cracks started to appear. Karen had approved expenditures without full board votes, miscategorized invoices, and presented incomplete receipts that didn't align with actual payments. Every anomaly, small on its own, built a pattern impossible to ignore. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because the magnitude of her deception grew exponentially when you began to connect the dots. $15,000 requested, $8,500 accounted for, $12,000 more spent without authorization, and months of falsified documentation covering the gaps. Each discrepancy was a thread waiting to unravel the whole scheme. The technical discovery intensified when I obtained emails between Karen and Ron Harper. She had sent him documents that appeared to be county approvals for the easement. They were convincing professional letterhead, official language, authentic-looking signatures. But as soon as I contacted the county, the truth emerged. No approval had been granted. The letter was a forgery, a deliberate act of fraud intended to mislead a private investor. Holding that email chain, seeing the evidence of intentional deceit, my hands shook with a mix of fury and focus. This wasn't just community politics anymore. This was criminal activity, staged right in front of everyone's eyes. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because the implications were massive. Fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, and document falsification all intersected in her actions. She had constructed an elaborate web designed to hide her personal gain under the guise of community improvement. And yet, for all her meticulous planning, She had left traces enough for someone determined, patient, and armed with legal expertise to unravel her operations. The next layer of discovery involved public records. County filings, survey maps, and easement denials were cross-checked with every claim Karen had made. Each time her narrative unraveled. She claimed ongoing negotiations. The county had clearly denied her request. She claimed HOA authorization for funds. The records showed selective approval. Every falsification, every lie, became another piece of evidence. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because witnessing the magnitude of this deception in cold, hard numbers is what turned my shock into resolve. I also interviewed key witnesses. HOA board members, some intimidated and hesitant, confirmed the pressure Karen exerted in private. Residents recalled vague promises about lake access that never materialized. Contractors and vendors couldn't verify invoices. Each testimony was another nail in the coffin of her credibility. These weren't just documents. They were living proof of manipulation, corroborated from multiple angles. The technical discovery wasn't just an academic exercise, it was the foundation of accountability. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? The scale of the fraud became undeniable when I started assembling it chronologically. Karen's initial approach, the denied petition, the misrepresented HOA funding, the forged county documents, the private LLC, the investor deception, it all formed a timeline that left no gaps. Each act built upon the last, and each escalation increased the personal and legal stakes. This wasn't a series of isolated mistakes. It was a pattern of calculated exploitation. Financial forensics added the final layer. Comparing bank statements, HOA budgets, and invoices revealed not just mismanagement, but intentional diversion. Karen's control over the accounts, combined with her selective reporting, created opportunities for theft that were masked as legitimate spending. Every dollar accounted for incorrectly was evidence of malfeasance. And when combined with the documented forgeries, her lies, and her manipulations of the board, a clear picture emerged. A person willing to sacrifice legality, ethics, and community trust for personal gain. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? It was at this point that I realized the magnitude of what we were dealing with. Karen Morrison had built a fragile empire on deceit, and every document, every email, every ledger entry was a hammer waiting to strike. The challenge wasn't just collecting evidence, it was presenting it in a way that would withstand scrutiny, expose the full scope of her actions, and hold her accountable. Technical discovery also meant understanding the law. Consulting with attorneys specializing in HOA governance and fraud, I verified that Karen's actions met the thresholds for criminal charges. Document forgery, wire fraud, and embezzlement weren't just possibilities, they were certainties. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? The legal framework provided the leverage I needed. Evidence alone wouldn't topple her empire. It needed authority, precision, and the ability to demonstrate undeniable proof. Finally, assembling all of this evidence was a matter of discipline and strategy. Every document was cataloged, every email chain printed and annotated, every financial irregularity highlighted. The technical discovery phase wasn't just about finding proof. It was about constructing an irrefutable narrative. And as I laid out the timeline, the pattern of calculated deception became painfully clear. Karen Morrison had systematically manipulated, lied, and stole, all while presenting herself as a trusted community leader. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because when the next confrontation occurs, The clarity and completeness of the evidence will leave no room for manipulation. Every resident, every board member, and every legal authority will see the truth. And that's when the power shift begins, when deceit meets documentation, and the law finally intersects with audacity. By the time I completed the technical discovery, I had amassed 3 years of evidence, spanning legal records, financial discrepancies, forged documents, and witness testimonies. This wasn't just preparation, it was the blueprint for confrontation. Karen Morrison had created an empire of lies, and now every lie, every act of deception would be exposed. The foundation of her power was built on perception, and perception alone until confronted with undeniable truth. The day finally arrived when the first confrontation would erupt. I could feel it in my chest, a mix of anticipation, controlled fury, and an iron resolve that had been building for weeks. The gate stood between us and the chaos to come. HOA Karen had become a fixture of intimidation, her presence synonymous with manipulation and entitlement. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because this moment was the culmination of months of careful evidence gathering, meticulous planning, and the steady cultivation of allies. I arrived early, the sun just beginning to cast long shadows across the pavement. The crisp morning air carried a deceptive calm, as if the world itself knew something significant was about to unfold. I could see Karen approaching in the distance, her posture rigid, her expression alternating between annoyance and calculated bravado. She had 2 companions with her, a woman in a sharp business suit and a man whose every movement screamed intimidation. They were her reinforcements, her attempt to project authority beyond what she actually possessed. But the gate, locked firmly under my control, was the first line of truth standing against her manufactured power. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because locking that gate wasn't just a physical act, it was a statement. It was the embodiment of legality, clarity, and moral authority. Karen arrived, and the moment she realized the gate wouldn't budge, her composure fractured. Her eyes widened, nostrils flaring, and then came the first words of her escalating tantrum. "I have rights! You can't do this! This is our community!" Her voice rang across the cul-de-sac, a mixture of anger, desperation, and entitlement. I met her gaze steadily, the calm of authority unshaken by her theatrics. "This is private property," I said plainly. "You and your guests have no legal access here. The gate is locked because this is my family's land. That's not negotiable." Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because witnessing someone used to controlling others suddenly confronted with law and principle is a lesson in real power dynamics. Karen's voice cracked as she tried to muster authority. "I've been president of the HOA for 10 years. You can't just lock people out." Her companions shifted nervously, unsure how to respond, realizing that the spectacle of power was slipping through their fingers. The confrontation escalated as Karen's rhetorical flourishes became more desperate. She began pacing, gesturing wildly, accusing me of theft, harassment, and obstruction. Each claim was met with a calm rebuttal, rooted in fact, law, and irrefutable documentation. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because this was the first public unmasking, a place where her words collided with incontrovertible evidence. I presented the county records, the deeds, and the emails with Ron Harper. Every assertion she made could be countered with proof, and slowly the bystanders began to shift their attention from her theatrics to the documents in my hands. Karen's anger intensified as neighbors arrived, drawn by the shouting. Their curiosity quickly morphed into concern, and then into disbelief. People who had long deferred to her authority now questioned her integrity openly. "She lied to us," one neighbor muttered under their breath, loud enough for others to hear. "She said we had lake access and we didn't." Karen's mouth opened, closed, and opened again, her words failing to form a coherent defense. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because the first cracks in her social armor were appearing, and I could see the realization dawn in her eyes that perception alone could not sustain her empire. The guests she had brought, presumably to intimidate or negotiate, began to waver. The man with the slicked-back hair scowled, shifting his weight from foot to foot. The woman in the expensive suit whispered into his ear, her confidence visibly shaken. Karen attempted to assert control through volume and accusation, but each claim now carried the weight of rebuttal. The HOA president, used to unquestioned compliance, found herself powerless against evidence, law, and community witnesses aligned on my side. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because at that moment, the first legal implications started to hit. Karen's threats, sent over text and verbally, now existed as part of a growing record of harassment. I had photographed every message, every email, every false claim. Each piece became ammunition for the inevitable legal confrontation. Her fury, once unbridled, now bordered on panic as she realized that law, documentation, and public scrutiny were converging against her. I allowed her moments to speak, strategically, to reveal her own fabrications. She claimed that the HOA had sanctioned every action she took. I countered with board meeting minutes, demonstrating that she had misrepresented approvals and intentionally obscured prior denials. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now, because presenting contradictions in real time, with witnesses present, created a psychological pressure far more effective than any legal argument alone. Karen's voice grew frantic. Her sentences fragmented as she attempted to reconstruct authority she no longer possessed. Neighbors began speaking up, their questions precise and pointed, aimed at unraveling the stories Karen had spun for years. "Where is our $15,000 for lake improvements?" one resident demanded. "Why were invoices submitted for companies that don't exist?" another shouted. Her composure crumbled further, revealing not confidence but desperation. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now, because listening to someone's own lies echoed back at them by a community they once commanded is a rare spectacle of both justice and human psychology. The first legal strike came when Ron Harper, the investor, stepped forward. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now. He recounted the pitch she had delivered, the promises of control over the lake, and the forged county documents she had provided. The crowd's attention shifted to him, absorbing every detail. Karen could no longer dominate the narrative. Her actions were now being narrated by witnesses and substantiated by evidence. Her face went pale, her words faltering into stammered denials. The man with the slicked-back hair glanced around nervously, clearly realizing that legal exposure was now imminent. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now. Karen attempted to redirect, accusing me of manipulation, claiming that I was twisting facts to seize property. But every accusation met a counterpoint. Every statement faced verification against unassailable documentation. Her own misrepresentations were becoming undeniable, public, and undeniable in their scope. The emotional crescendo in the crowd was palpable. Disbelief and anger coalesced into a collective demand for accountability. As the confrontation reached its peak, I displayed the forged county approval. Every eye in the audience saw the document, the very paper Karen had used to dupe an investor. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? The room went silent for a moment, as if collectively holding its breath. Then, questions erupted, and Karen's defense became a frantic scramble. She claimed the document was authentic, but no supporting evidence existed, and my prior verification with the county had already nullified her claim. Her guests, previously a wall of intimidation, now looked unsure, their role as enforcers undermined by her unraveling credibility. The confrontation escalated further when I presented the HOA financial discrepancies. Helen Martinez stepped forward, methodical and calm, and detailed the missing $12,000 plus the unaccounted $6,500 from the Lake Access Fund. Residents gasped as the misappropriations were made visible, and Karen's response was a flurry of excuses, half-truths, and defensive posturing. Before we go any further, comment below. Where are you watching from right now? Because watching someone's carefully constructed narrative collapse under the weight of facts is a rare, visceral experience. Karen's rage was now personal, a reaction to the undeniable exposure of her misconduct. Karen attempted to exit the confrontation, shoving past residents and her associates. But the crowd, armed with evidence and moral clarity, did not let her leave unchallenged. The physical act of trying to escape mirrored the collapse of her perceived authority. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Her threats, which had once been effective, now rang hollow in the face of unified witnesses, public accountability, and mounting evidence. By the time the confrontation concluded, the community had seen the full scope of Karen's actions, the forged documents, the misappropriated funds, the investor fraud, and the intentional deception of HOA members. The emotional climate shifted from shock and anger to collective empowerment. Karen's allies could no longer maintain the pretense of control, and her reign over the HOA was effectively dismantled in that single, relentless, and evidence-backed escalation. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because the psychological impact of confronting someone with the full weight of truth in a space they previously controlled is an experience that resonates far beyond the immediate event. Karen Morrison's facade of authority had shattered, replaced by exposure, legal risk, and the moral clarity of a community now aligned against her. And yet, even as the immediate confrontation ended, the legal ramifications were just beginning. I had anticipated this escalation, knowing that harassment, public outrage, and first legal strikes were only the opening acts. Every witness statement, every document displayed, every question from residents was now part of a record that would support forthcoming lawsuits and criminal investigations. The technical discovery had fueled the confrontation, and the confrontation was now fueling the expert retaliation to come. The morning after the confrontation, the weight of the previous day's events still hung in the air like a storm cloud. I sat at my kitchen table, sorting through emails and messages, each one a thread in the tangled web Karen had woven. Before we go any further, comment below. Where are you watching from right now? Because this was the stage where expert intervention would transform outrage into action and chaos into enforceable justice. The calm, deliberate work of law and documentation was about to collide with the arrogance of someone who thought she could operate above accountability. Tom called first, his voice tight with urgency. Michael, I've spoken to the district attorney's office. They've started opening a case. We're talking document fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, and trespassing. I leaned back, letting the gravity of the moment sink in. Karen's actions, her lies, her manipulations, all were now subject to official scrutiny. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because the realization that the system itself was now mobilized against a villain is a rare, exhilarating sense of power. Within hours, we began coordinating with multiple agencies. The county records office verified every deed, every denial, every communication Karen had attempted to fabricate. Every forged signature, every pseudo-approval, and every backdated memo was logged, cataloged, and preserved as evidence. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because witnessing meticulous documentation dismantle years of deception is a study in the patience and precision required for true justice. Meanwhile, Harper's attorney confirmed that the civil lawsuit was being drafted. The $250,000 investment, coupled with projected damages, meant that Karen faced not only criminal liability, but financial ruin. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because the convergence of criminal and civil exposure is a pressure point few manipulative figures survive. Karen's confidence, once impervious, was now a brittle shell, ready to shatter under combined legal scrutiny. Helen Martinez, now acting with authority as interim HOA president, compiled a comprehensive forensic audit of all financial records from the past 5 years. She meticulously compared expenditures, receipts, and board approvals, cross-referencing every line with bank statements. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because turning chaos into clear, undeniable proof is the work of experts, and that clarity is what crushes deception in its tracks. As the agencies and legal teams mobilized, Karen's attempts to regain control grew increasingly frantic. She sent emails to board members, calling emergency meetings, threatening to withhold HOA services, and even attempting to intimidate witnesses. Every single communication was captured, logged, and forwarded to the authorities. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because seeing the unraveling of a manipulator in real time, exposed by her own miscalculations, is both a legal and emotional triumph. The county district attorney assigned a team specifically to investigate the document forgery and the wire fraud. Investigators interviewed witnesses, cross-checked email chains, and confirmed that Karen had provided Harper with fabricated documents. Every confirmation was another nail in the coffin of her credibility. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because the intersection of law, fact, and moral authority is where justice begins to take tangible shape. Meanwhile, the civil attorneys began sending formal notices to Karen, demanding the return of the misappropriated $250,000 and compensation for damages. Each notice added pressure, legally obligating her to respond. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because when the law moves in coordinated precision, there is no place for manipulation or lies to hide. The HOA members, once hesitant, now rallied behind Helen and me. Board meetings became strategic sessions, where evidence was reviewed, testimony was planned, and questions anticipated. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because aligning a community with evidence-based strategy transforms outrage into unstoppable momentum. Karen, in desperation, tried one last gambit. She hired a private attorney to counteract the investigations, claiming harassment and alleging bias against her in every agency involved. Each claim was met with calm rebuttals, documentation, and evidence. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now, Because true authority is exercised not through intimidation, but through unassailable facts and procedural precision. The emotional toll on Karen became visible. Her public appearances shrank. Her attempts to communicate with residents dwindled. Every post, every email, every call she made was now a record against her. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because the transformation from untouchable authority to exposed fraudster is both dramatic and absolute. By the end of the first week, the system was fully engaged. The DA had collected all relevant evidence. Harper's lawsuit was officially filed. The HOA had completed a preliminary audit showing significant misappropriation. Karen's network of influence began to disintegrate as residents realized that alignment with her was no longer safe or morally acceptable. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because seeing the collapse of a fabricated empire under coordinated, expert retaliation is the most satisfying kind of vindication. The next phase involved controlled disclosure. Helen and I prepared presentations for the remaining HOA members, ensuring every detail was accounted for. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because knowledge, when shared strategically, is as powerful as any legal document. Karen's ability to manipulate perception was gone. The narrative was now guided by truth, law, and evidence. Karen attempted to contact Harper directly, pleading for leniency. His attorney, armed with documents and proof of fraud, refused all communication. The message was clear. Legal action would proceed, and negotiation was no longer an option. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because watching a manipulator confronted by the full weight of their consequences is a lesson in accountability that resonates far beyond the courtroom. Simultaneously, the media began to take notice. Amy Lawson, who had covered the initial HOA confrontation, received confirmation of the DA investigation and Harper's lawsuit. The story was no longer a rumor. It had legal, financial, and public dimensions. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because the intersection of law and public scrutiny ensures that accountability is not just possible, but inevitable. Karen's retreat became complete. The private attorney's attempts at defense faltered under the overwhelming evidence. Each fraudulent action, every misappropriated dollar, every falsified document was cataloged and undeniable. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because witnessing methodical justice dismantle arrogance is both instructional and profoundly satisfying. The emotional arc for the community transformed. Initially shocked and angry, HOA members now felt empowered. They saw that truth, evidence, and expert intervention could counter long-standing manipulation. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because building community trust through the transparency is a victory that extends far beyond any single confrontation. By the end of expert retaliation, Karen faced criminal investigation, civil lawsuits, and a board determined to remove her influence permanently. The system was not just reacting, it was orchestrating a collapse of deceit and exploitation. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because expert retaliation is not simply revenge, it is the deliberate, precise dismantling of injustice using law, evidence, and moral authority. The final piece involved preparing for court hearings and ongoing litigation. Tom and I organized every document, witness statement, and email in chronological order. We rehearsed presentations, anticipating objections and potential defenses. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because meticulous preparation transforms reactive justice into proactive, unassailable victory. Every step of Karen's unraveling demonstrated the power of expertise combined with persistence. The HOA's internal systems, previously manipulated for personal gain, now functioned transparently. Residents who had once feared reprisal now stood emboldened, witnessing the consequences of deception and the strength of coordinated accountability. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now. Because the lesson here is that systems, once understood and engaged properly, can enforce justice in ways individuals alone cannot. By the time the dust settled, Karen's influence was erased, her reputation tarnished, and her access to power legally and socially restricted. The expert retaliation phase had not only held her accountable, but created an environment in which the HOA could rebuild stronger, more transparent, and more resilient. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because the combination of legal precision, public documentation, and community alignment is what transforms outrage into irreversible action. The morning after the final court filings, the atmosphere in the neighborhood was almost surreal. The weight that had pressed down on every resident, the tension, the whispered doubts, the subtle fear of reprisal had begun to lift. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now. Because this is the moment when months of meticulous work, evidence gathering, and legal maneuvering start to crystallize into undeniable victory. Karen Morrison, once untouchable, was now a figure of public scrutiny and private defeat. Helen Martinez called early, her voice a mix of relief and triumph. Michael, the HOA board voted unanimously this morning. Karen is removed. She's barred from holding any office ever again, and the financial audit confirms every discrepancy we suspected. I felt a cold thrill of satisfaction. Justice was no longer a concept or a looming threat. It was tangible, real, and irreversible. Before we go any further, comment below. Where are you watching from right now? Because seeing the structures of deceit collapse under truth is the definition of vindication. The news traveled quickly. Residents who had once supported Karen now approached with apologies and expressions of gratitude. The room for fear and intimidation had evaporated, replaced by clarity and empowerment. The collective morale of the community had shifted, and with it, a sense of moral authority returned to Lakeview Meadows. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now. Because the transformation of a community from manipulated to informed is one of the most satisfying payoffs in any conflict. Tip 1. Harper's lawsuit moved forward with precision. The $250,000 plus damages were formally pursued, and Karen had no option but to comply. The civil pressure, combined with criminal charges filed by the DA, ensured that her financial and personal freedom would be constrained. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because when legal systems, community oversight, and evidence converge, manipulation meets immovable resistance. The HOA itself underwent a complete restructuring. Helen, acting as interim president, instituted transparent financial reporting, regular audits, and mandatory public documentation of all board decisions. The culture of fear and favoritism that Karen had fostered was systematically replaced with accountability and oversight. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because structural reform is the ultimate defense against future abuse. I remember standing on the lake's shore that afternoon, watching the water ripple in the breeze. The sunlight danced across the surface, reflecting gold and silver, reminding me of my grandfather's words. The truth, like this water, remains constant. Karen had tried to muddy it, to cloud it, to manipulate perception. But the lake's clarity mirrored the moral clarity of what had just transpired. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because in moments of reflection, the personal meaning of justice becomes crystal clear. The community's trust began to rebuild. Parents brought their children to the lake without hesitation. Neighbors greeted one another without fear of hidden agendas. The HOA meetings, once arenas of tension and manipulation, became spaces for genuine discussion and community planning. Karen's shadow no longer loomed over the neighborhood. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because seeing systems repaired after exploitation is as rewarding as holding the perpetrator accountable. I spent a morning walking the perimeter of the property, reflecting on what had been lost and what had been reclaimed. Every corner of the land, every inch of shoreline was now legally secure and morally protected. The lake, the heart of the dispute, was once again a sanctuary for family, friends, and community members who respected its boundaries. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because protecting what is rightfully yours is not just about possession, it's about principle. Jake, my nephew, arrived that weekend, brimming with excitement. I handed him the old gate key, the one my grandfather had used for decades. His eyes widened as he grasped the metal, the weight of family legacy pressing into his palm. "This is yours someday," I told him. "And when people try to take what belongs to you, you stand firm, with patience, with law, with truth. That's how we win." Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because passing on knowledge, courage, and legacy is the ultimate measure of victory. The final hearing for Karen's criminal charges was swift. The evidence was overwhelming, the witnesses impeccable, and her defense ineffective against documented truth. The DA outlined the wire fraud, the document forgery, and the misappropriated HOA funds in meticulous detail. By the time the proceedings concluded, Karen's reputation was irreparably damaged. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because seeing justice administered through the system, with precision and consequence, is the culmination of every effort we had invested. The community installed a new sign at the gate. Private property, Brennan Family Lake, established 1947. Simple, clear, indisputable. It was more than a sign. It was a symbol of restored authority, integrity, and the triumph of evidence over arrogance. Residents now knew exactly where boundaries lay, both physically and morally. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because symbols, when backed by law and truth, reinforce justice every day. Karen Morrison, once a figure of fear, was now a cautionary tale. Her schemes exposed, her lies documented, and her influence eradicated. She was left with no power over the very people she had sought to manipulate. The combined force of law, community action, and moral courage had neutralized her permanently. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because there is profound satisfaction in seeing the consequences of abuse realized without compromise. I reflected on the lessons embedded in this entire ordeal. Patience is more powerful than anger. Documentation is so stronger than rhetoric. Truth is immutable, and when wielded correctly, it transforms chaos into order, fear into empowerment, and deception into accountability. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because reflection turns victory into understanding, ensuring the lessons endure. In the weeks that followed, the community hosted a small gathering by the lake. Families shared stories, children fished and played, and the air carried a sense of renewed harmony. Helen, Tom, Harper, and I watched quietly, knowing that the victory was not mine alone, but shared by everyone who had refused to stay silent. Before we go any further, comment below. Where are you watching from right now? Because true victory is never solitary. It is the restoration of balance, justice, and trust to all affected. Finally, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting its warm glow across the water, I understood that the battle had been about far more than property or money. It had been about integrity, about refusing to allow power to corrupt without consequence, and about ensuring that truth remains the foundation upon which communities are built. Karen Morrison's downfall was absolute, but more importantly, the community had been restored. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because this moment, this clarity, is the moral payoff every battle for justice promises. I looked down at Jake, who held the gate key tightly, already dreaming of the adventures he and his friends would have. Remember this, I told him. Justice isn't always immediate. Sometimes it takes patience, sometimes it takes allies, but if you stand for truth in the end, it will prevail. The lake shimmered behind him, constant and unyielding, a reminder that some things like justice, family, and integrity endure forever. Before we go any further, comment below, where are you watching from right now? Because in recognizing the permanence of truth, we find both resolution and purpose. As night fell, I sat on the porch, letting the cool air wash over me. The events of the past weeks replayed in my mind, the confrontation, the escalation, the expert retaliation, and the ultimate victory. Every step had been deliberate, every action purposeful, and every outcome undeniable. Karen Morrison had been exposed, justice served, and the Brennan family lake secured for generations to come. Before we go any further, comment below where are you watching from right now? Because the full arc of conflict, resolution, and moral triumph is a lesson in how truth, persistence, and courage shape the world around us. And as the stars reflected on the still waters, I smiled, knowing that this was more than just a personal victory. It was a triumph for the community, for honesty, and for anyone who has ever stood against manipulation, corruption, and abuse of power. HOA Karen had finally been removed, her influence shattered, and the lake, our lake, remained a sanctuary of clarity, peace, and justice.